Who here has a nickname? Alexis, what's your nickname? Lexi, okay? I wonder where they got that nickname from. That's okay. Anybody else have a nickname? Brother Wayne?
My sister.
Oh, Barb thought you were going to give her nickname. There was an evil flame shooting across there. What's your sister's nickname?
No, it's my nickname. She couldn't speak properly when she was
Oh, okay.
only 2 to 3, whatever. And my nickname was Wee Wee.
Wee Wee. Okay. All right. Walter.
When I was a kid, I was my height already when I was like 14 years old. And they used to call me Pole Vaulter.
Pole vaulter. Okay. That's a good one. Pole vaulter. I'm thinking you must have been skinny at the time, too. All right. Casey, I see that hand flash? When I'm asking a question, you're not allowed to scratch an itch, buddy. All right. Somebody else, a nickname. Louise. Cookie. How sweet. All right. Martha, or Amanda, rather. Mandy. Okay. All right. Mrs. Taylor. Ian.
Iron Man. I'll tell you later why.
Then you woke up.
So, I have paychecks paid out like that.
Okay.
One company, Louis, I actually had a paycheck on. Said last night Louis on it. That was one of my nicknames when I was bush flying. Last night Louis.
Glass-eyed Louie.
Yeah, and
Okay.
Iron Man was my jazz name all through the years. A lot of people still there for that.
Wow. All right. All right. Gordo. When I was at the fire hall, I had a few nicknames over the years. The one guy used to call me Johnny, and other kids, everybody says, "Why do you call him Johnny?" "John the Baptist," he says. So, here's Johnny, he'd go. And the one that probably stuck the most, and you're gonna, well, where did that name come from? Was Stevie T. But anyway, I know it's pretty obvious where that one came from. But that's kind of what I finished off with. Probably the last 15 years, everybody called me Stevie T. So, anybody else? Ian, you've already given one. You can't have.
You're not mentioning one that you were called quite commonly here. Papa Tango.
Papa Tango. Okay, there you go. All right, good stuff. All right. Well, there's a man in the Bible, and I thought incorrectly, but I thought it actually called him this in the Bible. I've heard it so many times, but it's just we have given him this name. See if you can tell me who it is. The Weeping Prophet. That title is not in the Bible. Crystal, who is that? Jeremiah. And why did they call Jeremiah the Weeping Prophet? Lamentations. Also through Jeremiah. Jeremiah had a rough go. All right, as a prophet, he prophesied for some 40 years. He prophesied during the time of Josiah, which was the last good king. All right. And the next, next 23 years after that, they were all rotten kings. There was Jehoahaz. He was so bad, he only lasted 3 months. All right. There was Jehoiakim. He was there for about 11 years. And then Jehoiachin was another 3-monther. And finally, Zedekiah was about 11 years, and he was a terrible king as well. And his ministry, Jeremiah's ministry, was essentially to warn Judah to turn back. Remember, Israel had nothing but bad kings, the northern kingdom of Israel, all right, northern Israel, where the 10 tribes were, all of them were bad. Judah had roughly half and half, maybe slightly less, maybe 45% good and 55% bad, but it was pretty close to half and half, and the last two were all bad, all right? But he was there to warn them, look, you've got to turn around, you've got to change, or we're going to have the same fate as Israel, and you're going to get hauled away, and Israel got hauled away by the Assyrians. He said the people that are going to come and haul us away are the Babylonians. And he kept telling them that and telling them that. And Judah refused to believe. And he said, you know, king after king that turned away from him and so forth. And he kept prophesying they were going to go into captivity for, anybody know how long they were in captivity for? 70 years. You imagine now, 70 years, that's David, King David. You know how old King David was when he died? 70 years. And you know what it says about David when he died? He died an old man. All right, that was an average age back then. Now, time had progressed, and I don't think it had changed a whole lot, but we're looking at an entire, pretty well everybody that goes into captivity, that enters captivity, is going to die before it comes out. Some of the younger people, you know, some of the young kids might be, when they come out, you know, they're 10 or 11 when they get, they're going to be 81 when they finally get out, okay, when they get out of captivity. And then it's just going to be their children that are actually going to be released from captivity. But he kept warning them about this and warning them about this. And did they listen? No, they did not listen. And Jeremiah he would weep over them and weep over them. Going to look a little bit at Jeremiah. I want you to take your Bibles and come with me to Jeremiah chapter 11. We're going to start there. Jeremiah 11. Jeremiah was rejected by a number of groups. The first one being his neighbors, all right? In Jeremiah chapter 11, starting at verse number 19, and he says, "But I was like a lamb or an ox that is brought to the slaughter, and I knew not that they had devised devices against me, saying, Let us destroy the tree with the fruit thereof, and let us cut off him from the land of the living, that his name may be no more remembered. But, O Lord of hosts, that judgest righteously, that triest the reins in the heart, let me see thy vengeance on them, for unto thee have I revealed my cause. Therefore, thus saith the Lord of the men of Anathoth, that seek thy life, saying, Prophesy not in the name of the Lord, that thou die not by our hand." So the people from Anathoth that were just right there, they rejected Jeremiah. I want you to look at Jeremiah just over the page. It isn't my Bible anyway, chapter 12 and verse 6. It says, "For even thy brethren and the house of thy father, even they have dealt treacherously with thee. Yea, they have called a multitude after thee. Believe them not, though they speak fair words unto thee." Who else rejected Jeremiah? His family. Let's go to chapter 20. Chapter 20. Verse 1 and verse 2, it says, "Now Pashur, the son of Immer, the priest, who was also the chief governor of the house of the Lord, heard that Jeremiah prophesied these things. Then Pashur smote Jeremiah the prophet and put him in the stocks that were in the high gate of Benjamin, which was by the house of the Lord." Who's rejecting him here? The priests. You would think if anyone is going to accept him, it would be the priests, would you not? But even the priests and the prophets, they had nothing to do with him. Look at verse number 10, still in chapter 20. "For I heard the defaming of many, fear on every side. Report, say they, and we will report it. All of my familiars watched for my halting, saying, Peradventure he will be enticed, and we shall prevail against him, and we shall take our revenge on him." Who would the familiars be? His friends, okay? So his neighbors, his family, priests, his friends. And if that isn't enough, let's look at chapter 26. Verse number 8. "Now it came to pass, when Jeremiah had made an end of speaking all that the Lord had commanded him to speak unto all the people, that the priests and the prophets and all the people took him, saying, Thou shalt surely die." Who likes him here? Nobody. Okay? All the people are against him. There's one guy against all of Judah. All right? Let's look at chapter 36 and verse 23. I'll get there eventually. 36 verse 23. It says, "And it came to pass that when Jehudi had read the 3 or 4 leaves, he cut them with a penknife and cast it into the fire that was on the hearth, until all the roll was consumed in the fire that was on the hearth." Is that the verse I wanted? It is. All right. Let's read verse 24. Yet they were not afraid, nor rent their garments, neither the king nor any of the servants that heard all of these words. Actually, it's not the right one that I wanted. But it is. Verse 22. Now the king sat in the winter house in the 9th month, and there was a fire on the hearth burning before him. So this is the king, was a Jehudi. It's also kings didn't like him, okay? That's all I'm trying to get to here. So kings, there's neighbors, there's families, there's priests, there's friends, all the people, and the prophets as well, when it talks there in Jeremiah 26, verse 8. Who does he have left? God. Him and God. That's all he's got left. Nobody else wants anything to do with him. But you know what's amazing? As I was reading through, and this just jumped out at me. Look at chapter 39. So here he is, warning the people over and over again, you've got to turn back to God. You've got to turn away from these idols. You've got to stop doing what you're doing and do things right, do things God's way. And eventually, who comes in? Who comes in and takes them captive? The Babylonians. Who's the king of the Babylonians? Nebuchadnezzar, okay? Nebuchadnezzar. Let's take a look at chapter 39 in verse 10. It says, But Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, left of the poor of the people which had nothing in the land of Judah, and gave them vineyards and fields at the same time. Now Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, gave charge concerning Jeremiah to Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, saying, Take him and look well to him, and do him no harm, but do unto him even as he shall say unto thee. Just lost my spot there. So Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, sent, and Nebuchadnezzar, Rabsaris, and Nergal-sharezer, Rabmag, and all the king of Babylon's princes, even they sent and took Jeremiah out of the court of the prison, and committed him to Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan, that he would carry him home. So he dwelt among the people. After all those crazy names, who treated Jeremiah well? The enemy king. All right? All of his people had nothing to do with him, but they brought him back. So Jeremiah wasn't technically in the captivity. He got to stay in Judah. But while he was there, okay, the captivity of Judah is so important in history for the Jews, for everybody, that it's actually recorded 4 times in Scripture what happened. And it's kind of like reading the Gospels, where you can read through it, and you know, you'll see one account from Matthew, one account from Mark, one account from Luke, one account from John, all about the same account, so you get a really good picture as to exactly what happened. You can do the same with what happened here when Judah was taken captive by Nebuchadnezzar and the people being hauled away into captivity. It's in, you just jot these down, you can take them home and read them. We're not going to read all the passages for tonight, but in 2 Kings chapter 25, 2 Chronicles 36, verses 11 to 21, Jeremiah 39, and Jeremiah 52. Some of the problems that the people had, why they refused to listen to Jeremiah and turn away, is they had some thoughts in their mind, all right? They had some ideas here, and the first one was, well, David was promised to always have someone on, there's going to be someone on the throne forever in David's descendants. So they can't come and take us out. Who's going to sit on the throne forever that's in David's line? Jesus. They thought that it meant that it's going to be perpetual. They're going to have this kingdom, so that they didn't have to listen. They didn't believe him. So they took and they misunderstood the promise of God in the Davidic covenant line. The second thing that they had the problem with, and this is kind of mind-boggling, but they thought that, you know what, if another country comes and tries to take us, we've got our friends in Egypt, and they'll help us. That's what they believed. Did Egypt come and help them? No, Egypt did not come and help them. Okay, and we'll see that in just a minute. And the other thing was, they have this beautiful temple that Solomon has built, this sacred temple. And you think a little bit about, you know, the millions and millions of dollars worth of gold and billions of dollars worth of gold that's in this temple. And this is God's, and he's sacred and made it. There's no way God's going to let this get destroyed. Right? Why would God let it get destroyed? Deborah?
It means nothing to him if he doesn't have the worship that he deserves.
If he doesn't have the worship that he deserves, that building, like you're right, it means nothing. All right? Now, a judge punishes a criminal in order to uphold the law. A father chastens his children, or should chase his children, in order to build character into his child and assure his child that is loved. Same with God. When God chastens us, whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he believeth. All right? So God does that and allows some things to happen sometimes to us when we are drifting away and doing what we're not supposed to do. And God can allow some things to happen, not to because it's the law, but to try to get our attention, to bring us back to him. Okay? And that's what happened here. God would rather have his city and his temple be completely destroyed by the heathen than have his name disgraced by the wicked lives of his people. And they were warned and warned and warned. This is kind of a brief background of this broken and faithful prophet that we call the weeping prophet. And it takes us into Lamentations. I want you to flip over to Lamentations, chapter 1. It's interesting with Lamentations. You'll look at, if you'll notice, chapter 1 has 22 verses. Chapter 2 has 22 verses. Chapter 3 has 66 verses. Chapter 4 has 22 verses. Chapter 5 has 22 verses. You think it's odd that there's 22 verses? It's actually chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 4. Each of these verses, like Psalm 119, begins with a letter of the Hebrew alphabet and goes through. In chapter 3, where there's 66 verses, it's in each of these 3 verses. It goes in triplicates on the way down. Now, chapter 5 does not have anything to do with this acrostic, but the first 4 chapters all do. And Amanda brought up an interesting point to me the other day. She said, you know, that Lamentations is kind of like Psalm 119. I wonder if Jeremiah wrote Psalm 119. It's very possible. Then Psalm 119, we see over and over again where someone is persecuting him and so forth, and that's what happened with Jeremiah. It's possible, we don't know. But I thought that was an interesting observation that Amanda made there. And possibly because of the way that it's written in a poetic style, using the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, maybe a way to help people remember it, because they actually, on the date, I believe it's the date that follows, and I had that date, I forgot to write it down, as to when Judah was taken away. They celebrate this in the synagogues, and they read Lamentations on that date, all right? But the thing here is, I just want to look at what this Lamentations, when it's talking here, look at verse 1. It says, how doth the city sit solitary? What he's talking about here, it's all pictures. Through chapter 1, it's all a picture of Jerusalem. This blessed city that is now completely devastated, and he is weeping over this city. He's warned and warned and warned, and God told him to keep warning about them, and they didn't turn, and now he's looking at this city, and all of what he's talking about here as we go through here is just kind of a picture of Jerusalem. Okay, understand, that's what he's talking about. It says, how doth the city sit solitary that was full of people? How is she become as a widow, she that was great among the nations, and princess among the provinces? How is she become tributary, or become, this word tributary means kind of like a burden, like there's nothing that's here now. How did she, again, talking about this city, it's just a picture, okay, of this city, and it goes on to say, how did this, once a proud and a powerful city, and now it's nothing. It's rubble. They knocked the walls down. They've looted and destroyed the beautiful temple and ripped the gold out of there and just knocked it all down, and we know the walls were down and the gates were down. That's what Nehemiah came back later to help rebuild the wall, but they knocked all that down and just demolished this city that was powerful, that they thought no one could ever take. They thought they were invincible because of these reasons. Well, Egypt will come and help, or God's not going to let it happen. This is his place. God wants our hearts, just like Deborah said. He wants our hearts, not so much. Yeah, he was blessed by having that temple. The prophecies are there, and I believe it's in Deuteronomy, where he says, I'm going to set a place for my name. And it was a special place where the temple was. Do you remember where the temple was put? That temple was put on the place where David, if you remember, he numbered the people, and God swept in there and sent a plague in there, and David came and when he came to stop that, he says, God, take me, not the people. It was my fault that this happened, and there was 70,000 people that died. And he got to this threshing floor of Aruna, and at that spot, that's where God told the angel to stop, and that's where David made a sacrifice. There, he bought that property from him, and he made that sacrifice on that spot. That's the same spot where the temple was built. Exact same spot. But he set that spot aside for them to worship him, but he didn't have their hearts. The people were idolatrous, and they just did not care, and they didn't want anything to do with God and doing things the right way. They had all their what do they have? Have all their traditions and all ways of doing things, but it wasn't the way that God wanted it done, and it wasn't from their heart. It was just actions and polluted actions of other things there, okay? Let's keep reading on here. Verse number 2, okay? It says, she weepeth sore in the night, and her tears are on her cheeks. Among all her lovers, she hath none to comfort her. Again, it's talking, being like a woman here, being like a princess, as it sees in there. I'll spit my tongue out here. As it tells us in verse number 1, talks about her being like a princess. In verse number 2, it's saying, you know what? She has all these lovers. She's been unfaithful. She's been an adulterer. You know why? Because the Israelites had gone to other gods and so forth. It was just exactly the same kind of picture of what they were doing, was being unfaithful to God and worshiping other gods. Chemosh, Ashtaroth, Moloch, and all Baal, and all those other gods, and doing all kinds of wicked and evil things. And it says, so here it's talking in verse 2, it says, she weepeth sore in the night, and her tears are on her cheeks. Among all her lovers, she hath none to comfort her. All those other nations that Israel prostituted themselves with, they didn't come to help. Not Egypt, that they wanted to lean on, okay? They didn't come to help. And all her friends have dealt treacherously with her, all of those allies that she had, and they are become her enemies, because you can't have any of them. None of them wanted her anymore. And he's weeping over this. Judah is gone into captivity because of affliction and because of servitude. She dwelleth among the heathen. She findeth no rest. All her persecutors overtook her between the straits. Just like it said back there in verse number 2. They've all gone against her. The ways of Zion do mourn, because none come to the solemn feast. All her gates are desolate. Her priests sigh, her virgins are afflicted, and she is in bitterness. Verse 5. Her adversaries are the chief. Her enemies prosper. For the Lord hath afflicted her for the multitude of her transgressions. Over and over and over again. The multitude of things that she's done. And God kept sending prophets to them, and Jeremiah for 40 years warning, and yet they just continued to do what was wrong instead of turning. And they didn't like Jeremiah. They threw him down into a pit where he was sunk into the mire and all of these other things. Poor Jeremiah had to go through, but God protected him. It just blew my mind there when I was reading in chapter 39, and Nebuchadnezzar says, you do with him what he asks. Whatever he says, you do that, and you take him home. Why? God. That's why. All right. Verse number 6. And from the daughter of Zion all her beauty is departed. Her princes are become like harts that find no pasture, and they are gone without strength before the pursuer. She's done. This is what I want to look at really quickly tonight. Jerusalem remembered in the days of her affliction and of her miseries all her pleasant things that she had in the days of old, when her people fell into the hand of the enemy, and none did help her. The adversaries saw her and did mock at her Sabbaths. This is your God, the enemies would say. This is your God. This is what your God allows you to happen. And they mocked God because of what these people did. We have to be very careful because people are not, I said that wrong. I'm going to say because people are watching. We need to be very careful because God is watching, but understand where I'm going with this, all right? That's the main reason, is because God's watching and we answer to him. But not to put that aside, I don't know how I'm going to get to the point where I want to get to here. My point is this: we need to be godly people because ungodly people are watching to see us fall. Just like it says here in verse number 7, that they were watching them and they did mock at their Sabbaths. The adversaries saw her. They remembered the days of her affliction and her miseries. All right, and they went against it. And it is so important when you're trying to witness to some people and they see you that you are fake, see that you are living something else entirely. That's why the news always jumps on, somebody does something evil. Well, this guy was a deacon at a church. 20 years ago he was a deacon. Now look what he's done. Or if it's a pastor, look what they've done. Or this person was a Sunday school teacher. This guy, he went to church for years and years, and now look what he's done. You know why? They want to mock God. They want to say that God is not real. And right here, this is what happened with Israel. Israel's God, this your God, is you're going to mock at her Sabbaths. We're going to mock him. We so much need to live lives that are pleasing to God. Not looking over our shoulder, necessarily thinking about what is that person going to think if I do this. But if we're just answering to God, it doesn't matter what that other person's going to see what you're doing for God. They will. And it is so important. You don't even have to say something and someone can know what you are. Years ago, and I was working at Dominion. It's where I met my lovely wife. I remember coming out of the back room one time, and there was a new cashier that had started. And she was old. She was like 30, okay? But I was 16. And from the length of this, actually, what do you think, hon? Do you think our Dominion store is about the length of this building here? It's probably about the length of this building. That might be a little bit longer, the store was. And I come out of the back room, and I looked up, and I saw this lady up there who was probably like 30 or 31. And she was just checking out somebody, and I thought, she looks like a Christian. I don't know what it was. Turned out, she's a Christian. All right, she went to Central. Can't remember what her name was right now, but it wasn't like she was holding her Bible and ringing the stuff through at the same time, or she had a great big cross on her. There was none of that, okay? But I looked up there and I thought, she's a Christian. When people look at you, do they think that you're a Christian? When I was at White's, I remember a guy coming up to me one time, and I don't think I'd even talked to him. But he says, you go to church, don't you? Yeah, all the time. How did he know? I don't know. But when someone knows, when the people that you know you, and they know that you profess that you love God, what do they see? What do they see when something happens? What do they hear come out of your mouth when you stub your toe? What do they see you do when the cashier gives you the wrong change and gives you too much money, and they're watching? I wonder what this guy's going to do. Do you put it in your pocket and say, well, too bad, so sad for them? Or, wait a minute, you give me too much money. What do they see? The people here got to mock Israel because they were fake. Jeremiah wasn't. Jeremiah was real. And he kept warning the people, you're wrong, you're false here. But where are we? Are we real? We should be real. We've got to be real for him. And the others falls into place. But we need to be real for God. Let's pray. Precious Father, thank you for your word.